And that's funny because I actually had one, I think she was just white. I don't know what she was. She wasn't Muslim. And she was almost offended by that. She was like, why is it that I told her I make Muslim films for Muslims. And she was like, why do you do that? Don't you feel like we're being left out? And I was like, don't you realize this is how we feel every single day? I've never I've never walked into a cinema and been like, oh yeah, this perfectly defines me and my existence, right? Yeah. That's how it is to be a minority, is that you're constantly on the outside. I thought, why don't we reverse that? Why don't we turn the other world, the non-Muslim world, into the background, right? The inside world, the thing that is in focus really is our Islamic identity.
Yeah.
Like most Muslim youth, I knew Islam was the truth, but never took time to study my own deen. I mean, I tried many times to open my eyes, but the style kept putting me to sleep. One day I heard a brother say he was going to a class round the way, so I decided I would make my way and see what they had to say, and I must say, it was like nothing that I had ever seen. So many young people all in love with their deen. For once I felt community, so much unity was new to me. The instructors reached out to me and taught me Islam beautifully. They made the gray clear and were experts in their fields, professional and exceptional, like the answer to my prayers. I never wanted the weekend to end, so many gems and new friends, and now I recommend that everybody should attend. City to city, the impact is pretty amazing, inspiring an entire nation. Al Maghrib Institute, not your typical college or school, but a chance to change your life. Now, what's your excuse?
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to today's Islam 21C Unscripted Podcast. After a long hiatus and being a bit of a diva, alhamdulillah, my co-host is back, Omar Suleiman. Assalamu alaikum, Omar.
Assalamu Sulaiman.
Where the heck have you been?
Only busy living life and doing some work, and got a couple of exciting projects that are in the pipeline, inshallah. So that is the reason. It's been a noble reason. Yeah. I hope. Yeah.
It's not because his demands were too high that we couldn't.
Now that we've agreed the budget, it's okay. I'm back.
Where's his mocha latte? We agreed no more like famous
always
people.
Be my
like
mocha latte, bro.
We're happy to run across.
Good.
Boonaa Mohammed.
The
Mashallah.
Americano. The black Americano.
I thought
Canadiano.
I thought you were Canadian. Yeah.
Same thing. So you guys, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Pretty much.
Tim Hortons, bro.
Tim Hortons. Except we are still connected to the Queen somehow.
Even more so now.
Oh yeah.
Potentially.
We're taking on your drama. There you go. You're welcome.
Yeah, looking after Sentinel. You know when you have family in it and like the mother and father want to teach the kids a lesson and then they send them somewhere, but they still care for them, so they don't want to send them too far.
They send them back home. So
yeah, exactly.
We're the back home.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah.
So look after Harry and Meghan for us.
I'll do my personal best, inshallah.
Harry's a nice guy, man.
Yeah. Well, I haven't met him personally, but I'll take your word for it. Yeah.
I'll tell him to get in touch.
Please.
Inshallah.
Yes, give my WhatsApp. That's cool.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah.
What's your number?
I'll tell you after.
Yeah. Right.
So Boonaa Mohammed, mashallah. He's been in the game for a while. We're at an Al Maghrib Ilm Fest event and you're hosting the show. Tell us about yourself. Not that, nobody knows you, but how would you like to describe yourself? Because you've been doing spoken word, you've been doing films now.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm a storyteller. I think that'd be the kind of broad definition. I think, especially in the Islamic concept, in the Islamic context, oftentimes we don't realize how embedded story is in our faith. 1/3 of the Quran is dedicated to stories. Allah Azza wa Jal relates stories to us constantly. I was just listening to a beautiful lecture by Sheikh Walid Basuni breaking down Surah Yusuf and all the points we can learn from it. And oftentimes when I think of even something like Surah Yusuf, to me it's like the best movie ever. Like it has all the makings of a crazy epic journey, So I've always been fascinated with stories since I was very young. And poetry has been my outlet naturally as I was a young person, but gradually growing up and getting the experience that I got through attending media school and always having a fascination of television, of movie, of film, I never really saw myself represented in the media that we watch. And that's across the board. I'm sure it's the same thing here. How often have you seen a character that looked like you, that came from the same background as you, that wasn't, some type of joke or caricature, right?
Usually the bad guy.
Usually,
I remember watching
sniffling character.
Watching a few films that I showing my kids some films that I used to watch when I was a kid, like back in the 90s or something.
Aladdin?
No, like you could have been an Aladdin. Or the genie. Like, like simple, benign kind of films
Sure,
where there's no kind of, overt racism or anything in it. And then I realized, wait a second, all the goodies are white, and like they went out of the way to find a dark-skinned baddie.
Yeah.
Or the school bully or whatever.
Yeah, there's so many subliminal levels to it. Like the fact that we don't see any positive representation is one. Yeah. But secondary, I think, as a culture that has story embedded within it, why aren't we telling our own stories? The famous saying goes that if you're not at the table, you are on the menu. Yeah. If we are not telling our story, best believe somebody is willing to do it for us. Yeah. And that's the track record we've seen in Hollywood, right? Yeah.
And is that a responsibility of, I guess, in the West, where mainly it's been kind of immigrant communities, versus is there more of a responsibility on the Muslim world to produce good quality international, standard media for us to consume?
Well, I think it's a bit of both. I mean, I think the fact that we live in the West, we have to be cognizant of the fact that it is a different culture. I don't think a movie in Kuwait or something based in Kuwait is going to have as much to do with us. The nuances of our language, of our culture, I think that is uniquely us. That's uniquely British and Muslim. That's uniquely Canadian and Muslim. Yeah. And I think that oftentimes those nuances get lost in the wider scope of just, Muslim movies or Muslim films or TV shows that sometimes you do see produced in the Muslim world. And it's odd because I think if you look at the track record, I mean, you look at India, you look at Bollywood, how many people actually in Bollywood are Muslim? Tons. Right? Yeah. In Nollywood right now as well, this is a big, industry in Nigeria. They're popping out films, it seems like every 15 minutes, right? A good chunk of them are Muslim, right? Yeah. So it is happening in a weird kind of microcosm on that side of the world. I think, ironically enough, it hasn't really translated here. We don't really have any media that represents us.
Yeah. I think it's part of it is because, I mean, I'd like there to be, more and more people, Muslim people in the arts and, film and that kind of cinema even. But I find it a bit cringeworthy when everything that we do has to be overtly about us being Muslim or the Muslimness aspect, right? Similar to like comedians, right? If they're like an ethnic minority and all their jokes are just about that, it kind of gets kind of tiring a bit. But if they just do things that they regard as normal without going out of their way to highlight their kind of their otherness,
Islam, right? Their otherness,
not in like an evil way, like hide your Islam or anything, but just be normal how you.
Sure. But are we actually at ease with our identity in the West, the Muslims here? Because I was talking about it because our fiqh seems to still be evolving, our cultural baggage, and I mean that, look, I come from the Indian subcontinent. How much of my deen was wrapped up in being from Pakistan? Sure. Trying to untangle that still. We're told that we're British citizens, but the reality is that we don't feel it. We say it. This is what everyone says, but they know, actually, voting has shown that, and the way we're perceived in the media. So all of this we're kind of contending with, but at the same time we're told that when you are in a position, be yourself. Are we at the position where we know what ourselves is or who we are at the moment? Yeah. Do you have the same angst in Canada?
I think it's interesting because as much as I do like the theory of and I think it's shown, like, any community that presents itself as quote unquote normal or shows the other side of them, the wider society is more willing to accept them and learn more about them. I don't have to say in specific communities, but that's a trend we see in media. One thing that I've struggled with, and this is me being completely honest, is that I think there are so many specific nuances of being a Muslim that once you play the part, I try and create media from a Muslim perspective, which is very different. It's hard to appease the masses when you are based upon Islamic values. Yeah. This is things that I've struggled with, right? I don't know how to do something mainstream, but yet authentic to Islam. It's a very, very challenging balance. I personally don't know how to do it. So I've actually taken the route of saying that, look, we are not a minority. We're like 1/4 of the world's population. In fact, we are a majority in many parts of the world. Why is it so difficult for us to then claim that and be proud of that and not hide or shy away? And this is what happens, I think, with a lot of Muslim artists, is that we do have the mainstream in mind. We have white people in mind. We try and create art that is palatable to the mainstream audience. I haven't found that to be as rewarding. I think I'd rather focus on the Muslim niche market, which is telling stories that I don't always have to translate every single word. I don't have to say, inshallah, God willing. That's what you got to do in mainstream cinema, so that everyone feels a part of it. For me, it's like, this is where you're at. This is where we start from. The starting point is Islam.
No subtitles.
No subtitles. The context, culture, a lot of things I don't even explain to you, because I just assume you come in knowing that. And that's funny, because I actually had one, I think she was just white. I don't know what she was. She wasn't Muslim. And she was almost offended by that. She was like, why is it that I told her I make Muslim films for Muslims? And she was like, why do you do that? Don't you feel like we're being left out? And I was like, don't you realize this is how we feel every single day? I've never seen, I've never walked into a cinema and been like, oh yeah, this perfectly defines me and my existence, right? Yeah. That's how it is to be a minority, is that you're constantly on the outside. I thought, why don't we reverse that? Why don't we turn the other world, the non-Muslim world, into the background, right? The inside world, the thing that is in focus really is our Islamic identity. Yeah.
Just a question: were you born into a Muslim family, raised as a Muslim?
Brother, I'm from Ethiopia. This is where Hijrah. This is the Prophet ﷺ sent his family. We were Muslim before some of the Arabs even, right? We are a very proud people. SubhanAllah. Even my ethnic group, we are Oromo. This is a little bit of controversy. Some Somalis might disagree, but we claim as the ancestry of Bilal.
Okay.
So Bilal, his full name
which Bilal?
Bilal ibn Rabah. Okay. Is there Bilal in Middlesbrough I should be worried about? Okay. So Bilal ibn Rabah was his name, radiallahu anhu. Roba in my language is a name. Okay. Roba means rain. But it's a popular boy's name, right? So that's one of the dalil they use to say, look, his father's name was actually an Oromo name. Like, this is my tribe in Ethiopia. Wow. And it's a common name to this day. So that's our claim. Some Somalis everyone from East Africa disagrees, by the way. They say, oh, he's from our tribe or whatever. But
so you were raised as a practicing Muslim, or?
I was raised as a Muslim. Practicing is, that's a bit sketchy sometimes. But I was raised like many Muslims are, with kind of a cultural understanding of Islam. I went to madrasa when I was young. I didn't learn a thing. I was just literally there to make trouble, many kids are.
Got some beats.
Yeah, and then they come with the stick, right? That's the worst, when your parents bring the stick with you to give to your teacher. And it was just the reality of pre 9/11 North America was that Islam wasn't really well known. We didn't have much access. I'm sure it was same here. We don't have much access to knowledge actually in the English language. And after 9/11 is really when I think I had an Islamic awakening.
And all the good books got translated.
Well, I mean, for better or for worse, there was just an Islamic awakening. Everybody just decided like, we should really, I remember having kids in my school ask me, do you know in the Quran it says that, you have to do this and that to non-Muslims and you can't do this. And I was like, for real? Does it say that? I never read the Quran, right? I never read it in English at least. I was reading in Arabic. I didn't know what it meant. And I think after that point, I was actually in high school. It was my first year of high school, grade 9. I don't know what you guys call it here. Year 9, I assume. Yeah. Okay. That was 9/11 was my first day of high school. Wow. And automatically, just the world had changed. Yeah, it was a big change in the world. And it was from that point onwards, I started kind of the tinkerings of Islamic awakening had begun. It wasn't until I'd gone to university and I had attended one of the best media schools in Canada. And mind you, this media school accepts 300 students every single year. Thousands of students apply. Only 300 get in. In my entire school, in my graduating class, there were about probably like 2.5 Muslims. Like half. I don't know. One guy was a bit shady. I don't know. I would question his Islam. But that goes to show you the emphasis we place in media.
Yeah, that's right.
He was eating gelatin at the
graduation ceremony. I don't know. But that goes to show you the importance of telling our own story. It never existed. Muslims never saw, as immigrant communities, our first things are, tell our kids to go into, become doctors, go to engineering, IT. This is kind of our business.
Did you find that you had a kind of bubble in which you acted out your Muslimness and then a bubble for everything else? Or
were you first seen actually before that question that comes before that? Were you first seen as Muslim or being black?
Oh, I was always seen as black. Black, I can't hide. Muslim, I can hide.
Yeah. Okay.
Black is something that I think definitely being African, being black has shaped my worldview. It's something that I've been black for a very long time.
Okay.
How long? Like from the day I was born, I haven't been any.
Funny enough,
right?
Yeah.
And I think actually being African and Muslim is again a very unique paradigm.
Yeah, I agree.
Because it's something that a lot of people sometimes don't accept your Islam off the bat. They look at you and they'd be like, oh, you're really, like, I remember when I started practicing Islam, because people knew me before that as not really practicing. And then when I started getting more religious, they'd be like, oh, I didn't even know or realize, even though my last name is Mohammed, mind you, right? But it was just like given, like, you're one of them too. I didn't, I didn't imagine that.
That's interesting because I mean, Islam in the I assume that you had some of the relics in where you grew up of the American experience of black Muslims, right? So you had that kind of cultural icon, that those icons and that vocabulary that you could kind of borrow from in Canada.
Yeah, right? I think actually a lot of it comes from hip hop.
Yeah.
Oddly
so
enough,
that kind of counterculture, the Muslimness is easy to kind of piggyback along that.
I think yes and no. Canada is unique in the sense that we don't really have African Americans, right? Like African Americans are relegated to basically America. We obviously have a history of slavery in Canada, but for whatever reason, there isn't as much or as large as an African Canadian population that you would say is indigenous to Canada.
But did you look up to, in terms of media wise, who did you look up to, like American Muslims?
Yeah, no, there were no American Muslims that I even saw, right? It was mainly black people. That was what I saw. And again, if you look in the history of hip hop, there's a lot of Muslim culture embedded within the culture. You have to think of even the Nation of Islam and the immense role they played. Malcolm X obviously, paved the way as well. And a lot of that culture trickled down. So it was normal to hear, people like Rakim, a famous rapper back in the day, and their references to Islam. Obviously, they have their own skewed versions of Islam. It's not authentic kind of Islam that we practice today. But there were parts of it that were there.
But there's still a reference point.
Yeah.
Just like now, I say this often, is that when you're a Muslim and you see somebody who's got a Muslim name in any significant position, you've built some sort of affinity with them.
Your ears perk up. You're like, oh.
Exactly. Even in basketball, for example.
Like just subconsciously.
Yeah.
Because that's what I'm interested in. People like.
Of course, yeah.
People like Professor Sherman Jackson, he writes a lot about the Black American Muslim movement, right, and how it became like a cultural phenomenon, that Muslimness and blackness. So I mean, one person said that Allah saved or preserved Islam in the United States, at least, through black people.
Oh yeah,
that was like it became a cultural thing. People as communities came to Islam, and understood their root, because a lot of them were. Before slavery, they came from Muslim societies anyway.
Right. Well, again, so being East African, we have a long legacy and history of Islam. So when we, in our little pockets and bubbles that we live, it's like, that's the asl is Islam. Like, there's no rediscovery or anything. I think there's a big cultural gap between ourselves and our cultures because my family came to Canada as refugees, right? They were fleeing war. So the idea of preserving Islam wasn't on the tip of their tongues. It wasn't the number one thing they thought about. It was literally survival. So because they were in that state, once we were born and coming of age, Islam, again, they weren't necessarily thinking about it or focused on it. It was something that it was
took it for granted.
You took it for granted. We're all Muslim.
Yeah. Especially Ethiopia, because it's quite interesting. We don't often have, or we haven't had an Ethiopian guest before from that with the heritage. But Ethiopia's position from an Islamic world view, right, especially end of days, etc., and historically, it's very significant compared to other countries.
It is.
And is this ever talked about? Even if you look at the beginning of the end of the days, or when the Kaaba, when it will come to get its destruction, it will come from Ethiopia.
Don't blame me for that, by the way. I have nothing to do with that. I'm with you guys here.
That's it, alhamdulillah.
Say but inshallah.
But it's very significant, as in specifically that region. Why I suppose that, and even from before, from Abraha, etc. So there's this long line connecting or giving significance to Ethiopia. That's not really talked about.
It isn't. And actually where my family is from, where my father's from, is a city called Harar in Ethiopia.
Okay.
And it's the 4th Islamic capital in the world. People don't know that. It comes right after Jerusalem. It's Mecca, Medina, Jerusalem, Harar. Harar is a city that within a small radius, there is a masjid for every 3 families. Can you imagine that there's a masjid, a musalla, you say a masjid like the size of this room. I mean, the people watching can't see this, but you would share a masjid with maybe 4 neighbors, every household. That's how condensed it is with Islam.
MashaAllah.
And this is a place where, the Prophet ﷺ obviously sent his family for hijrah. We know this is well documented, but it's also the place where, Islam has flourished for many, many years. And there have been many scholars and ulama, and it's a place that, even to this day, still produces hufad and a lot of that. But again, sometimes that history is sometimes overlooked. But
I agree.
East Africa in general. I mean, you look at Somalia. Somalia is the only country that I'm aware of that's like 98% Sunni Muslim, right? There aren't even any other groups of Muslims in Ethiopia. I mean, in Somalia, right? And you look at places like Kenya, and sometimes people forget how deep Islam is in Africa. It's in the majority. It's the majority religion in the entire continent.
Assalamualaikum guys, sorry to butt in, but if you're enjoying this podcast, please head over to islam20c.com/donate to help us make more. And if you're not enjoying it, head over anyway and help us make better ones.
And what's the relationship like of the Muslims within Ethiopia? Because there's a huge, I guess, Christian community, and even a Jewish community, isn't there?
There is, yeah. So oddly enough, we have those three major religions within that one nation. The Jews actually were mainly taken out and brought to Israel in the Palestinian region, really. So there's not really as many Jews, but my parents grew up with Christians because it's actually a beautiful example of how people can live harmoniously. We never had any issues with Christians. You know, your neighbors would be Christian. You would feel like you were, still related, and it was actually, my parents always talked about it in a very positive light. They never really had that tension that you see today that exists.
They can learn from in the Western world.
You can. People sometimes don't think like, how can these cultures live together? And it happens all the time, like in places like Africa and a lot of different regions where Christians and Muslims live together harmoniously, no issues whatsoever. I mean, of course there will be certain issues, but those issues mainly actually come along tribal and tribal lines and ethnic lines.
Or is someone just an annoying neighbor?
That's definitely a cause for concern.
Eritrea, the issue with Eritrea, for example.
So Eritrea example, the people who left or fought for their independence from Ethiopia. My wife is Eritrean actually as well. They were Muslim and Christian. Those people who fought against the Ethiopian regime, they were Muslim and Christian, and now Eritrea today is a Muslim and Christian dominated country. So those issues, and a lot of that has to do with colonialization, a lot of that has to do with how the colonies were divided, the way in which they carved up Africa. Certain groups were given certain powers.
Setting up a hierarchy within
setting up hierarchies. This is a long,
That's
very
what
deep
kind
discussion.
of precipitated the Rwandan genocide.
Well, exactly. You setting up parameters for who is in charge of the nation after the empire leaves, right? And so we blame white people pretty much for all of Africa.
How to continue the legacy of colonialism.
Informal colonialism now from afar, kind of.
Do you tackle this in coming back to your media kind of work? Do you tackle any of these topics?
Oh, definitely not. No, I have nothing to do with that. No. This is just kind of my background. I mean, for me, I'm a Canadian Muslim.
I heard one of your spoken word pieces. What do you call them? Poems, raps?
I mean, whatever you feel comfortable with, brother. Go for it.
It's called music, mashallah.
That harami thing you do, brother. What do you call it?
That banging track.
Yeah,
it was about your experience of racism amongst Muslims, for example. That was a deep one. Tell us about that.
I mean, it's something that I think it's an unspoken known.
Or just not like maybe like a microaggressions. People don't realize it when they.
There's some macroaggressions as well. There's some straight up. I live next to. I've said this in another podcast before. I live next to a predominantly. We would call you guys Desi, by the way. We wouldn't call you Asian. In North America, Asian is like proper Chinese. Like you're not Asian.
Definitely not, especially with this virus going on.
Exactly. You want to take that. You want to take that Asian card back right away. For your own health. So I live next to a predominantly like Indo-Pak kind of masjid. There you go. Okay, good. Good to know you have that. I'll make a good joke in the future.
Tell me first so I can put
give you a heads up. So I live next to a predominantly Indo-Pak masjid, and I pray in that masjid every day, all my salah, and like nobody says salam to me.
Really?
I just walk in, I pray, I leave. I'm invisible.
Do they say salam to each other?
Yeah. They say salam to each other.
Nobody says salam to me either.
Well, you kind of look a little black, to be honest. You got a little black thing going on. You look a little light skin.
I'm 1/64th black.
There you go. Right, and it seems kind of minute. Like it doesn't seem like a big issue, but
maybe
to be invisible, to be invisible in
spite
religious
of your profile.
spaces. In spite of I'm a big deal. Mind you,
Mashallah.
like in my community.
I don't. You know what I mean? I mean that seriously. People obviously know you.
So in my particular local masjid, they may not all know me, right? I don't really do much in my local masjid. I'm more kind of, I travel around and I'm more active in different masajid across the city. Toronto's a very big city. But despite the fact, even if they didn't know me, just to be in a space where this is where Allah is mentioned, announcements are made afterwards in another language. And they just like, it's like you don't need, it's like, I don't understand what you're saying.
No one takes the effort to come and tell you.
Yeah, it's like, brother, don't worry, this has nothing to do with
Are these guys generally older? Or do you find it from the younger community as well?
I think I'm positive to say that, the future of the Muslim leadership will be different. I think this is to do with the baggage of our uncles and the people. And Jazakumullah khairan, they did a great job. And they did what they could with what they knew, right? But I think that alongside the fact that, oftentimes, like we said, like, even Islam, Black, Africa, these are not in our vocabulary. We don't necessarily associate Islam with Africa. We don't associate Islam with Blackness. And to me, that's a shame. And I think that is, and even funny enough, me doing films, poetry, rap, for people even to say, "Oh, brother, you're doing rap now." That's like just like the R word is like, it's like, oh my God, astaghfirullah. Because in our vocabulary, rap is Black culture, and that is inherently bad, right? Something which comes from the Black people, right, is something bad. But I mean, you could, in Indo-Pak culture, people are singing Bollywood, sing song, dance, whatever. You can say whatever you want, but the moment it's done in that kind of context,
in a different way,
it's a different level of haram. Right.
Yeah, of course, man.
Right. So I think that's problematic. And for me, I guess I've always loved to use storytelling as a way of challenging those norms.
Good.
So my art has been something that I've utilized as a tool to really challenge those kind of systems that we set up. And of course, it's one of those unfortunate realities and unfortunate truths. Even in the film that I'm coming out with, that I've actually been promoting recently, Righteous Sinner, and I want to talk more about it because I think one of the themes that I deal with in the film is actually racism. And how it looks when someone, for example, a Black Muslim male would want to approach an Arab or a Desi family for marriage. Yeah. That's like super haram to do, man. That's like, you get every door in the world shut in front of you, right? And of course, there's a lot of cultural baggage that comes along with that. But that's
so the film Righteous Sinner, it's talking about the well-known story of Barsisa the monk.
Yeah. Let's have a look at the trailer. I've connected up here. You already know what happened, so I'll show myself. Well.
As you can see, we have a new imam who is joined over center, Sheikh Musa. He will be leading the prayers and teaching Quran to our youth.
I appreciate your medical opinion, but I kind of find it hard to believe that a little lack of sleep means that I'm depressed.
You need something to pick you back up, you let me know.
What's wrong?
Father had a heart attack.
Would you be able to watch over her while we're gone? You heard the news. A woman was just attacked in the building behind ours.
Unless you help me, help you.
This is Detective Marcus Canby from the Metropolitan Police Department.
Don't you ever tell anybody about what happened.
Looks good, man.
Better, I'm in it.
Even then, it looks alright.
It's well made.
So
is it kept in line with the actual story, or where does it depart?
Yeah. So actually, I found it ironic that...
Spoiler alert, isn't it?
It's kind of half spoiler alert, 50-50 spoiler alert. Yeah. A lot of Muslims actually don't know the story of Barsisa. I think it's common in kind of, religiously kind of circles. But the story of Barsisa is one that's narrated by Ibn Kathir. It's not a hadith per se.
Yeah.
It's one of the Israeliyat stories. So it's one of the stories of the people of the past that we don't say is authentic, we don't say is non-authentic, but we take the benefit from it. And it's a story about a monk during the time of Bani Israel who is tasked with looking after the sister of his neighbors. Yeah. And the brothers, they go off for war, I believe, and they leave him behind. Right. And they ask him...
Which he didn't want to do at first.
Which he didn't want to do. They ask him, will you look after our sister? And he says no, initially. And then they kind of continually ask him until finally he says, okay, fine, I'll do it. And in the midst of that relationship or that interaction, one day... Shaitan will come to him and tell him, okay, she's lonely in the house, bring her some food, make her feel at home, bit by bit. And he will do that. And the next day the Shaitan would convince him, why don't you just come and eat dinner with her, sit and be with her in the home. And then eventually he would do that until eventually they ended up making zina. And after they made zina, she became pregnant, and in order to cover up this major controversy, he ends up killing her. And I know you guys know the story. I'm just relaying for people.
No, it's important. It's more. Yeah.
And afterwards, the brothers returned back, and they asked him what happened to our sister, and he said, at that time people used to die. Just naturally say, oh, she died, and I buried her in such and such area. And the brothers accepted that at face value, until eventually Shaitan came to the brothers, one of the brothers, and told them, actually, Barsisa made zina with her, and she was pregnant with her child. If you go and dig up the body right now, you'll find that she was pregnant. So the Shaitan convinced him to do so. He goes and he finds the body. He finds she's pregnant. Obviously, these brothers want revenge. They go after Barsisa. And in that moment, in Barsisa's moment of weakness, Shaitan comes to him and says, I can get you out of this if you do one thing. And Barsisa says, what is that? I'm just paraphrasing the story. Yeah. He says, make sajda to me. completely give yourself to me and I will get you out of this. And so Barsisa, who was a pious man, mind you, he was a monk. So that would be the equivalent of, a very righteous person, right? He ends up making sajda to shaitan. And after he does that, basically the brothers kill him and that's it. He ends up dying in a state of kufr. So there's so many when I heard that story initially, I was like, whoa, this is crazy. First of all, like this really happened, And then I thought, what would that look like if it happened today in this day and age? Because there's so many lessons you can draw from that story. And the scholars actually comment, really that story is about the tricks of shaitan. Yeah. Right? It's about how shaitan works slowly kind of cutting away at the fundamentals.
What's really interesting about that story, especially people who have gone through various religious movements, they're people who consider themselves the saved sect right today. And they say, because our aqidah is pristine and pure, then it doesn't matter what we do. And it's unbelievable. I'm saying this now, but people actually
I don't want to be next to those guys on the day of judgment.
But the sin doesn't matter as long as your aqidah is pure.
Sure.
As long as your aqidah doesn't have any dilution in it, then you can do sins and ask Allah for forgiveness. But what this story also shows us,
their leader as their savior,
is how sins actually lead to that point. Because the more sins you start doing, you get to that point where you start losing sight of who you're sinning against.
Yeah, of course. If you take the sinning of Allah Azza wa Jalla, you take sinning against Allah Azza wa Jalla as a small sin, that is a major sin in of itself, right? To limit it goes both ways. To limit the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, say, oh, Allah will never, harm me. And then to also say, well, Allah will always forgive me no matter what. Both extremes put you in a problematic state. But another thing is that what the scholars comment on is that Barsisa was an abid, not an alim, right? Yeah. So he was a person who was a righteous, prayed all his salah, did the basics, but he wasn't the person who was very smart and knowledgeable in Islam. And I think that's what really separates people from going down those major roads is ilm, right? Once you have knowledge, it's harder for you to commit to those types of acts, and that's why knowledge is so important, because it saves you and protects you from that. So in the movie, this is a spoiler alert, the character that I play, Barsisa,
we don't have a button for that.
Is there a button for that?
No, I don't know.
You have like a horn? You have okay. Sorry. Time's up. All right. So my character, he's a student who's studying in an Islamic university, and he's called back home because his father, who is an imam at their local masjid, has passed away. So he's called back to his community to help lead their community. So again, he's not fully finished his studies. He's just completed the bare necessities. So that puts him in an awkward state. But the community is still very desperate for his usage. So they say, you're here, you're good enough. In the meantime, you be our interim imam, and he's obviously grown up in the masjid. They respect him and honor him, but he's not ready for that. And in fact, he's actually suffering from a lot of deep-seated issues that aren't addressed. Another major aspect of the film is about mental health.
So here's something actually interesting to bring in your other work around media. The story of Barsisa is about the gradualization, how the sins add up and add up.
Sure.
In today's age, with access to social media, you can see how that what ends up with zina doesn't have to start with speaking to someone in person.
Oh, no.
It can start with one message via any sort of platform. And so now the work that you're doing in media, how do you balance it in light of our fiqh and understanding? Because it is a challenging area. I work in finance, and Islamic finance particularly. There's so many nuances. We're looking at new things, now the way people trade, etc. You can trade from your phone. Now with media as well. In terms of bringing the benefit and then also the tools that I use and how you do it. How have you managed to navigate through this?
Yeah, I think you're right. It's an evolving fiqh, I think 20 years ago, there's no way I would have been able to do this. Just the community's understanding of what is acceptable has definitely changed and evolved.
20 years ago, you were like 10 years old, probably.
20, oh, brother, black don't crack. You'll never know how old I am. I could be 100. You'll never know. My secret, right? It's me and my dermatologist, the only people that know.
But you're in the 9th grade in 9/11. So.
Oh, okay, good, smart. You've done some
quick
math there. Yeah,
quick maths.
Quick maths. Yeah. But no, I think that the thing that I've always tried to cling on to is having people of knowledge around me. So, for example, Sheikh Navid Aziz is my advisor for all the films that I do. He reads the scripts, he goes over the production with me, and it's important to have that.
He's fundraising for a major masjid in his area.
He is, exactly.
Good.
He's been a mentor of mine for many years now, and having people like him in my corner has added to my success. I think because when you're able to get that scholarly input. And sometimes he'll challenge me. Sometimes he'll tell me, I don't know about this. And if you don't have people that do that for you, if you have a bunch of yes men,
Then you can go to someone else who'll say yes.
Oh yeah, you can go buy a fatwa if you really need to, right? That's always on the market.
Buyfatwa.com.
Yeah, but I think that's been important to me. I have a lot of shuyukh actually who've always lent me expertise, and being connected with Al Maghrib has obviously helped give me access to a lot of that.
How can we watch this film? Is it coming out in the UK?
So the film right now is being toured around the world. One of the challenges that I found is really distribution of media. At this point, we don't really have a system set up, not like in Hollywood where, okay, boom, send it to the theaters, they do their runtime, then you put it to DVDs, and it kind of trickles down. Right now, the only way to see the film literally is for me to take it to communities. The films cost money to make. I need to recoup the costs. So we charge a nominal admission fee. People watch the films. I provide a post-film analysis. We do a Q&A. I do a discussion. And what I really try and do is use the films as a learning tool. So the films are then brought forward as an example that we can base and have a conversation on. Once you've seen the story of this character in the film, whose name is Musa, we can say, okay, we can sit back and say, what did Musa do wrong? Should Musa have done this? Should he have done that? That's how you get people to critically think.
So how can we? When are you bringing it to UK? Is it already touring or?
It's touring the world right now. I've brought it to places in the US and Canada. I'm doing my first screenings in early April in London and Manchester, and then hopefully, inshallah, I'm looking for opportunities to tour the film nationally throughout the UK. The UK has always been a great supporter of mine in terms of showing films, and I think people they're kind of like, oh, it's another Islamic film. The novelty maybe is worn off a little bit here, but there's only I can only think of 6 or 7 really Muslim films, and mine are, I don't want to brag, but mine are really Muslim films, right? I'm extreme Muslim, alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
But in the sense that we try and, for example, I only use nasheed-based production, as for my soundtrack. That's extremely hard to do. People don't understand the difficulty of that. To capture emotions and sounds and all that kind of stuff.
So actually, that's a good point actually, because if you produce it, even some of your spoken word stuff, Salman and I are working on a platform in which to put Islamic kind of songs.
You're talking about our boy band?
No, our other platform.
Okay,
it's really it's got a unique name. It's called Notflix.
Okay,
very naughty, my friend. Yeah.
So maybe we can put it on there somewhere. What do you reckon?
Yeah, maybe.
Is that a real thing or?
Netflix.
It will be now.
Okay, there you go. I'm sure we can get some investors, some uncles out there. That's a very good idea.
Yeah, we can Netflix.
Yeah. Gee.
Kya baat hai.
Put that on there. You should have one of Wah. Okay, that's good, Masha. So you're gonna be touring. When you go
on terms, I didn't know you just did kind of even the soundtracks and everything, because that's really, really good to hear, because I think having these, calling them restrictions or whatever, it actually is an impetus for creativity, for innovation, and
people don't realize the amount of effort that goes into just trying to stay within the boundaries of the Sharia, and I actually am conscious of that. So, for example, we use nasheed-based. The whole thing is based upon a cappella sounds and vocals. Secondly, we don't show
and trombones.
The vocal trombone that we found. I think that's another sound. That's, that's an after lunch sound. We also try and we don't use any grotesque violence. We don't show any women.
I mean, it's easy. It's easy to it's easy to do all of those things and then just put something mediocre through. But if something that doesn't have that stuff, it really requires the talent and the the effort to put on it.
And to your point earlier, we don't just tell Muslimy good feel good stories, right? This is not a happy story, right? And it's not meant to be something that's this great PR stunt to show the world how great Muslims are. It's the reality of what people go through. It's a very sad story. The guy is going through very difficult times, and at the end of it, we come away.
It's almost Shakespearean in that sense, because
it's a tragedy.
Sheikh Zubair.
Sheikh Zubair, he was actually part of the production. Sheikh Zubair came through.
Keeping it real, man.
Mashallah.
What was I going to say? We spoke to Abrar Hussain. He's a filmmaker as well a few months ago on the podcast. Do you know him?
I haven't met him, but I know who he is. One Day in the Haram.
I mean, he was kind of described as coming up with a novel distribution mechanism outside of the mainstream kind of the norm, and that might be good to maybe connect you two guys up, because
I want to I don't want to turn this into a diss track, but I have some issues with not his films. I think
round one, fight.
There you go. No, as a filmmaker, I think he because I watched One Day in the Haram. And
he did One Night in Al-Aqsa.
And One Night in Al-Aqsa, And I thought from the Muslim community's perspective, to see that much enthusiasm towards it was great, but it was also kind of sad in a way, because that is an entry level in terms of storytelling, right? His film is very easy to digest. It's about the haram. If you don't love the haram, very safe, very safe. And the fact that Islamic organizations, charities, everyone just jumps towards that, to me as a critical filmmaker, is very frustrating. Yeah. Because I've had boundaries put in front of me because people are like, "Oh, brother, it's not a very happy story. You know, there's too many black people in it." So black guys running around throughout the entire thing, you know. And
they were the black brothers that were saying this, yeah.
Yeah, they were darker than me. I was like, astaghfirullah, akhi, right? But the fact that I'm trying to do something which is critical of our community, it's entering a new lexicon into our dialect. It's not something people are
push the envelope. This is how we grow.
That's right. That's how we, and I know that, and I think we know that. But trying to explain that to the masses is sometimes not an easy task, right? So I think what he's done with his films is great. He's introduced people to the genre of Islamic films, even though I think certain things, as I think he used music and stuff like that, which there's difference of opinion on.
Music and even in one day in the haram.
One day in the haram.
It was all Abdullah Roll, and it was all.
Oh, was it? Okay, good. Well, good for him.
Vocals and stuff. Yeah.
So that's just me hating for no reason. Yeah, that's probably what that is. Yeah.
Abdullah Roll, guys. See a little similarity there.
And that's racist. That's racist. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
He was the guy in the Matrix.
I know it.
I like how he gave himself that
exactly.
Yeah.
To this day, my sister, we're always cussing her. Yeah? She thinks Samuel L. Jackson was in the Matrix. I was like, you are incredibly racist.
Yeah, that's a common stereotype. The worst is in Bethlehem. There's a quote of Nelson Mandela, and it's really Morgan Freeman. And there's a big mural of Morgan Freeman, and there's a quote of Nelson Mandela, and people are just like, "Oh yeah, it's awesome. That's the same guy, right?"
But other people think packs look the same. Innit?
Yeah,
they're kind of right in a way.
Yeah, bro. Yeah,
you guys, I mean, yeah. If you're the definition, is not going well.
Alhamdulillah. No, it's good. So,
but yeah, just back to what I'm saying.
Guy.
Yeah, you and him look a lot. Just to finish what I was saying, I love what he's done, and I think I want more Muslim filmmakers to kind of come out of the shadows. I should say come out of the closet, right? If they're in the closet for whatever reasons, come out and come into.
We call it a cupboard here.
A cupboard, okay. Yeah. Very small closet, but that's fine.
Yeah.
I think Muslim filmmakers and artists need to be more on the forefront of, because really what Muslim art does is it pushes culture as well, and we are in the process right now of redefining what that Muslim culture looks like in Britain, in Canada, in the US, and that's what art is mainly there for. And I think telling our own stories is so important. So kudos to him. My good friend as well, Omar Reagan, who had his film as well. Again, I can be critical of each one of their projects and be like, oh, I didn't like that, but for the most part, I'm happy that they're doing something, because it allows me to.
What other films have you done?
So I've shot 3 films that I've released so far. My first film, Tug of War, which was about 2 young Muslims who become radicalized, and that was at the height of kind of this whole ISIS thing. It was in 2015. I did another film called Detainee X, which I released about 2 years ago, which is a story of a young Muslim American who gets wrongfully convicted of being a terrorist, and he's sent to the secret prison where he's tortured, and that's a lot to do with kind of Guantanamo Bay. This film, Righteous Sinner, I have a 4th film that I've actually shot already. We're just finishing the editing for. This is exclusive for your audience. It's called Super Hijabi. It's a Muslim kids film, which is another genre that I'd love to explore, because there isn't really much for our kids nowadays. We do a lot of cheesy cartoon stuff, but like proper dramatic kids films. It was inspired by actually Home Alone.
You've got jokes for the parents as well.
Oh man,
so it's inspired by Home Alone.
It's a Muslim remake of Home Alone.
So what happens? The Bleak Jamaat turn up.
Yeah, for 40 minutes actually only. Yeah, only 40 minutes.
Set some traps for them.
Yeah. We set a lot. We set haram chicken all around. They fall. And they fall down and die. No, so it's based upon loosely based on Home Alone. I don't want to say based on Home Alone,
but true story.
But it's this young Muslim girl who's empowered through her understanding of technology, and she's like a tech genius. So she devises all these intricate plans, and she has her own kind of augmented reality system that she creates, and her home is actually robbed by these 2 criminals. Her parents are going through some issues in their relationship, and the robbery kind of sets off this huge chain of events, which makes them go further into this discussion of divorce. And so in order to help save her parents' marriage, she feels like she has to get back her parents safe. So she uses her technology to basically track down these 2 bad guys, and it's a really cool film.
Assalamu alaikum guys, last reminder I promise. Head over to islam21c.com/donate to help this movement get to the next level. So we have genuine, high quality media articulating Islam in the 21st century and developing confident Muslims impacting the world for the better.
So what happens if some feminists say to you the only reason she was at home is because her dad wouldn't let her out?
I saw that one coming a mile away.
Yeah, your finger was already
put my hand
there.
there. That's the one.
I feel like you guys probably practiced that one. That was too natural.
No. But this is good actually. The fact that we got to have good quality production for our children as well. And you can, when I was growing up anyway, at least The Message and Line of the Desert, they were like the staple collection of films that had Muslims in, especially
The Message, The
Message.
Oh man, that's
and
like
Line
60s.
of the Desert. Line of the Desert.
Oh right.
It had
Son
Oliver
Omar
Reed
was
in
a
it.
young lad.
Oliver Reed in it, and it was about Mukhtar.
Yes.
Very well made again, and it had Anthony Quinn in it playing the main character.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
So what?
That was it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested to see what happens. With our next generation, our kids. They're growing up, they're seeing Muslim people, identifiably Muslim people that like them, just being the good guy, being the protagonist, being
Well, I think that's
inshallah,
unique perspective. People who because there's a lot of Muslims in media right now. There's a lot of people you can find. Like you search around, you'll see Muslim names everywhere.
Yeah.
But how many people really care about Islam? And I don't like that distinction between practicing and non-practicing. Everybody comes with the different levels of religiosity.
Yeah. Let's call it saved and condemned.
That's one way of looking at it. Pretty extreme way, but you can have it. But I think that notion of speaking from a Muslim's perspective, not being shy and being confident in the fact that I believe this, and I really believe this Muslim stuff. It's crazy to some people when you say that, like, because funny enough, most of the actors, most of the crew that work on my films are non-Muslim. So sometimes they'll ask questions like, well, why can't the guy and the girl touch? And I'm like, because I said so.
Because it's haram.
Yeah. Like, because that's what this is the also. Like, we
get that sometimes with our crew as well.
Is it? Maybe they ask why you guys touch so much?
No. Our production crew, man.
Is it?
Maybe they're asking you for the dalil and stuff. Well,
non-Muslims, if they need a dalil, I think they're closer to Islam than we think. But, just the fact that I come in from that notion of, like, this is what I think is right. This is the base point. Everything that is contrary to the sunnah is something which is outside of the scope of what it is we want to do. To explaining that to non-Muslims in the film industry is
you shouldn't have to anyway. I mean, let's do your thing.
No, but to be honest, I don't have enough Muslims around me. I wish I could have a Muslim.
You know what? I think one of my issues is I think it's hard to get your content if you're doing screenings like that. When you're present and that kind of stuff. And if I miss that, I haven't seen any. I want to see. I remember seeing the adverts and stuff.
Yeah. So no.
If you have some kind of streaming service that you can pay for and it will help the
after the films are toured, you can just download them online.
Okay.
So that just put your whole argument to shame.
Okay. I don't feel guilty about buying them from that Chinese gentleman on DVD.
Yeah.
You will if he coughs on you.
But which one?
If you just go to Safina Media, SafinaMedia.com, all my films are available there for download. So once the films have gone through their natural life cycle, that's what happens with films. They go through theaters, and then it used to be DVDs back in the day. Now it's no longer DVDs. It's streaming platforms. Once they've gone through that natural life cycle, then they're available for private screening. I actually have them available for private screening. If you want to just watch it at home, you can actually purchase a public screening license, so you can actually buy the film and show it to other people, or even an educational license, so you can buy it and show it to your school, your little halaqah, whatever you want to show.
Might be a good idea to do like tours where you're going to Masjid or Mattresses or Islamic societies or MSAs, you guys call them, with that particular lesson in mind. That this is a tour about looking at life of Barsisa, for example. Here's a kind of dramatic a retelling of the story.
What do you think I've been doing all this time?
I don't know, as a specific thing, within different lesson from the perspective of the lessons, right? Not just
that's what I do.
In terms of like school. So for example, I go to this Saturday school for kids, right?
You go to it for kids?
Yeah, I go there.
Have you learnt much?
I'm in the special needs class. But I'm a teacher there for the parents. But it would be good, like, just to have a specific tour, just to show, just for that kind of segment, and then maybe you can get someone around here.
So what I have is
you know and trust, and is a good friend of yours.
I can ask you guys if you're interested. So one thing I have is after the film is available online, it comes with an educational teaching kit. Yeah. So my first film actually came with a kit afterwards that teachers or community leaders, youth leaders can utilize, questions they can ask, reflect all the points that I would make in my post-film presentation. It's all there for consumption.
I think there's a general point here. I mean, irrespective of whether it's done via the tool.
We need to wrap up in a...
Yeah. The point, I was just trying to roll into that to finish on this point. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Time's up. Yeah.
I was going to say the importance of supporting these type of things. I know you were saying Subhan Life is a Masjid project and these type of things. We had this conversation when Umar Isa was there as well. That Muslims who are trying to provide something ultimately that's not. not on the edge, but in the sense of looking after our needs differently. We need to see the value in that, and we should be supporting these things, because when our children start spending hours upon hours on YouTube, you know, funding some little Oriental kid looking at toys, you know, and we're happy, and we're happy to pay money on these, then our stuff that's going to benefit and give our children lessons, and even ourselves lessons, we really should as a community support these things. Alhamdulillah.
You know, the only thing I take comfort in is you know, because it's from the fault of Allah Azza wa Jal that I've been able to do this thus far. I'm really passionate about this work, and it's something that I always thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for even giving me that opportunity. And I feel like I'm opening doors for other people down the line. I seem crazy today to some people going around to Masjid saying, I want to raise funds to make a Muslim movie. Right? Imagine hearing that fundraiser after Jama'ah. People are like, what? There's people dying here. And they don't understand that you can walk and talk at the same time. You know, there's many causes you can support, right? And everything has its, you know, its due rights. And this is definitely one of them. I feel like in future's time, inshallah, this will seem crazy. The fact that I even had to ask people, the fact that people they weren't sure of the value of Muslim cinema or films. And I only take comfort in the fact that, you know, in the future, inshallah, hopefully somebody will come out to a screening. I will inspire a future filmmaker. Somebody will see that you're comfortable enough in your own skin to tell your own stories, and they will take that and do what I'm doing 10 times beyond that, you know? I remember when I started off doing spoken word, by the way, I used to get those strangest looks. Coming into like UK universities, I would do a poem and people would be like, can I clap? I don't know. Like, can I look down? I got it. Like, it was just the awkwardest thing, because it just arts. So this is 10 years ago, mind you. You know, the Muslim art scene was in its such infant stage. Now it's a huge industry, and you know, I'm happy to say that I've influenced some of those people along the way that I still work with to this day. So you
help blow it up.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to use those exact words, but it's. Okay, that's the sound effect I was hoping to use, not the other one. But it's important that, you know, someone like me who is trying new things. You know, I just keep telling myself this. You know, don't lose hope.
Keep doing it, man.
It's worth it.
And it doesn't mean that every time you get it right, but that's what happens when you're kind of leading the way. Then you're going to be in an area that, you know, subhanAllah, it happens with all of us. You know, so if it does happen, people overlook the faults and support what's good, inshallah.
They don't.
I'm not saying great. No, but if I'm saying about you, I'm saying generally.
Right.
When you're trying to push, I mean, we get it with the podcast. You know, if we have certain guests, people will kick up a fuss, but they can't see the bigger thing that we're doing.
You are the fuss. That's the
I know that's the problem, isn't it? I know, I get it about him. So No, but it's important. Alhamdulillah, we keep on doing. We support what's good. Inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Actually, you know, maybe we say Jazakallah khair for your efforts in this area.
Keep doing it. Keep keeping it real, and don't burn out.
That's very hard to say. I mean, like, you know, Allah give us all tawfiq, because even, you know, a platform like this, I know for a fact it's not easy to maintain. You know, there's a lot of work that goes in behind the scenes, but I think it's important for the foundation. You know, we are creating the foundations right now, and inshallah in the future it will be made much easier for us.
Inshallah.
On that bombshell, we've got to wrap up. We've got to get you back to where you need to go.
I got things to do, man.
Jazakallah khair for coming. Jazakallah Omar coming back. And Jazakallah khair for watching at home. If you like this podcast, give it a like and a share. And remember that we're on all the podcast platforms. Wherever you get your podcasts, give it a subscribe. And listen to this while you're commuting, cooking, driving, wherever you do.
And check out my film at righteoussinner.com as well. You can find me on Instagram. Thanks for asking me about Safina. That, by the way. Yeah, very important. Yeah.
Safina something as well.
Yeah, SafinaMedia.com. And also I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all that good stuff.
Safina, double E or I?
Is there a W in Safina?
Double E.
Double E or I? SAFINA Media. That's the name of my media production company. Yeah.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Unscripted.